understanding in chapter 1, what we will focus on is the two legs that are used to bring in external suppliers into the organization. We talked about sourcing and outsourcing. Okay, those two is, if you go away today, you need to think about those and make sure that you understand them. All right. The procurement cycle, that, like I said last time, consists of these 13 different distinct stages, and at a later stage we'll talk about them. Let's now dive into what outsourcing is. Outsourcing means you are contracting a supplier to manage a function that was previously handled in-house. Okay? And remember, the key element about outsourcing is that you only outsource things that are non-critical, non-core. Is usually done for non-core. Things that are not critical to the operations of your organization. Keep that at the back of your mind. So, and also one characteristic of outsourcing is that you used to have capabilities to do it in-house. And I remember having took you through the make or buy decisions. Remember that we had the conversation about that. Outsourcing may be preferred for the following reasons. Why would you want to outsource items that you have capability to do in-house, but they are non-core? There are people who may outsource core activities, but it's not advised. It's not advisable. So the advantages for you to outsource any activities could be for reasons of financial gain, okay? Where you allow costs, overheads to be kept as effective as possible and enable the organization to obtain value for money. Those are reasons for outsourcing. A question in the exam could be, which one of these three? They could ask you 4 and they tell you which ones of these 3 are, or maybe they would say which one is not a reason for outsourcing. And then they put the correct 3 and the wrong one. They're calling the wrong one. But remember this, financial is reason 1, technology, to reduce the need for continual investment in new machinery, you may want to outsource. Resource, to avoid the need to recruit more people. Skill sets, to enable an organization to benefit from an outsourced supplier's skills. There are certain companies that just specialize in certain specific small types of work. I'll show you the types of work that you can outsource. Improve focus, and then reduce the risk. These are the reasons why companies may choose to outsource. Remember, outsourcing means you contract a third party to manage a function that you used to do yourself. Okay. We talked about the make or buy decision. I remember this clearly. The make or buy decision is whether to manufacture a product or provide a service in-house. Okay, this is where you do the make or buy decision. It requires thinking about the following factors. Number 1, the product itself or service. If the product or service is core to the organization, the decision to make rather than buy is a better decision. So, let's think about the manufacturing sector for a moment, okay? Yeah, the name again is? TV, yes. I actually knew, I just wanted to confirm. City, what car do you drive? You don't have a car. If you your hubby doesn't have. I didn't hear that.
She doesn't have both. She's just like me.
Oh, you said?
Just like
None of the above. All right. Which one do you are you going to be driving after you finish this course? So you're going to be promoted. You don't have to be in trouble.
I love questionnaire.
You know, just think about any automotive industry. And we are talking about the decision to make or buy. If they are to manufacture engines, okay, let's say the engine block, or let's just say the engine itself. Engine assembly. This is in the automotive. Do you think it would be wise for the automotive company to make it or buy it? And give me a reason why. Buying it means you get it in from a supplier. Making it means it comes from in-house. What would be the right decision to make with regards to assembling engines for an automotive manufacturer? CD? Yours is? I also knew it, I just want to know. Nomfundo thinks we should buy it from a supplier. Anybody online, what would you think is the right thing for you to do as a car manufacturer with regards to engine assembly? Give me a reason why you would try to say something online. Go for it, guys.
Aren't you supposed to make an analysis first whether to decide before you can say, I want to make or buy?
I want you to already think about an analysis. Kraljik, I think you had your hand up. Is that Kraljik? I saw some hand up.
Yes, I had my hand up.
Yes.
As a car manufacturer, your engine is you've got it's your intelligence in there. So you would obviously make it in-house, because if you had to give somebody else the specs, you'd be giving them the whole brain of the operation. It's your core function.
Absolutely. You see, that is the kind of thinking that you should adopt, the decision-making process, Portia, that you should go through. When you think about make or buy, you should think about how critical this item is with your intellectual property. Every company I know which makes vehicles, they do the assembly of the engines in-house. They don't give it to somebody else. These things like, the tires, you know the tire assembly? You know the difference between the whole wheel assembly, where there is a rubber rim and bolts and things. Those things you can outsource. You can get a third party to do it. He brings you complete ones. But engines, you do them in-house. They buy the engine block, they do all those things in-house. The point is, you need to understand the critical nature of the item that you are trying to procure. So if the product or service is core to the organization, this is the first point that we said here. You have to make and not buy. The organization's current position, if the organization currently has capacity to make the item, then you do it. The current market's situation, if buying the product or service would create economies of scale with an existing supplier or in part of the logistics operation within the supply chain, this could result in the cost saving. So you will obviously buy it in. And then the amount of competition. So all these are items that you need to look at when you are considering a make or buy. Now, And understanding the level of competition may also help inform the decision on whether you want to make or buy the product. Porter's forces, 5 forces. Mr. Porter is a guy you will meet in many of your courses when you're doing SIPs, all right? He is one of the professors that, it's not only SIPs, but you'll find him in many other economics, industrial engineering, and so on. So Porter's 5 forces show how competition can be examined within a marketplace. It actually shows 3 or in fact 5 areas which you need to consider when you are trying to assess the competitiveness of an industry. Okay? It looks at the threat of new entrants, bargaining power of suppliers, the threat of substitutes, bargaining power of the buyers, and the rivalry among existing competitors. So that is one thing that the Porter's 5 forces looks at. Now, what does this tell you when you are trying to make a decision on whether you should make or buy? All right. You look at the level of competition that there is. There are so many. There are no threats of market entrance. There are many suppliers out there. Would you rather want to make an item or buy it? If there are many suppliers that are available out in the market, what decision would you make? For some reason today, your volume is low.
I'll check the options first.
Yeah, the option I've given you is you've got a lot of suppliers. That's the only information I've given you. I need you to make a decision whether you will make or buy. Other things can come later. No, from the what you?
Some of the stuff I will buy. Some of the other stuff I will make it.
Okay. Why would you invest in tooling when you can get it next door? And the threat of new market entrance is not high. There are plenty of suppliers. Somebody says, I'll buy as Molefe. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Charles, I would rather buy. I mean, there are many of them out there. I wouldn't go and invest in expensive equipment, machinery. There are maybe 5 or 6 which I can play around with the price, among themselves.
I like that. That's what I was looking for, guys. You need to think about it holistically, because remember, when you, especially in the manufacturing industry, and much of what you come across in the SIPs is biased towards the manufacturing industry. Yeah, thanks, Leanne. I see your comment as well. So, yeah, and it is correct. You would rather buy instead of make. Let's look at the strategic and tactical sourcing costs and benefits of outsourcing. So we're still dealing with outsourcing and sourcing as well. There are costs associated with all forms of sourcing, including the following. Number 1, procurement professionals' salaries. Right? Resources such as computers and telephones and training. And like I said to you guys, don't be tired of me repeating these for your sake so that they stick in your mind, because multiple choice is as tricky as this. We need to flip every stone and look underneath and see if there's anything hiding that you need to comes to your mind. And like I said, you can follow me in your textbook, but have a pen to write with. Mark it as you go along with me, so that you do not leave it as blank as it is. Okay, try as much as possible to listen with your eyes, with your ears, and with your mouth. Okay? If you just listen with your ears, you might fall asleep. But listen with your eyes, listen with your mouth, so that some of these things you can repeat them. In order to establish the amount of cost that should be attributed to a product or service need that has been identified, it is necessary to understand the categories that the need falls into. So by using the Kraljik Matrix, procurement professionals identify where a product or service sits in relation to the impact it has on the organization's profit and the level of supply risk it poses to the organization. Now, what I've done as well is, let me go through the Kraljik Matrix. I have explained it on, and I've put this on the YouTube page for the college. So please, if you, did you subscribe to the YouTube page? You don't have access to YouTube, you don't watch YouTube?
I'm trying to pray those things now.
Okay. Listen to it as often, as many times as you can. But Kraljik Matrix, it is something that as you go along, you will know it like the back of your hand. If you don't know it so well, don't stress. But as you go along, you will master it. Okay. Now, the reason why we are talking about this is just to demonstrate that when you use Kraljik Matrix, you can identify where a product or a service sits in relation to the impact that it has in the organization's profit, and it can help you to make the right decisions that are related to its management in the whole process. Now, Kraljik Matrix has got 4 quadrants. On the horizontal axis, which is usually called the x-axis in, it has the supply risk. Other commentators say complexity of supply market. Okay. Then on the vertical axis, and in this, or towards the right it's high, towards the left the supply risk is low. On the vertical axis, which is usually called the y-axis, it shows the importance of the item in relation to profit. Okay, it may not sometimes be profit, but it may be criticality in terms of manufacturing. Because some of you will procure capital equipment and they will not necessarily show you how much profitable they will be, but they will be important in the operation. If it's not there, the machine will not run. And it's high this way and low that way. In the top right quadrant of the Kraljik Matrix, is that a right Kraljik? No, that's A here. The Kraljik Matrix. All the items that are in the top right quadrant are strategic. What we have in the, why are they strategic? Because they come from a market that is complex and they generate high income for you. With these guys, normally you have long-term contracts. And normally the kind of relationships, supplier relationships that you have with them is, you could say, an alliance. Strategic alliance, supply relationships. On the bottom right, you have what we call bottlenecks. You can see that these items that are in the bottleneck quadrant, they've got high risk but low profit. However, when they fail or when they're not available, they can really pose a problem. But you don't use them so much. So these ones also are characterized by long obtain contracts. And the kind of relationships is like an arm's length relationship. You keep them there, but you know, this is where you find contracts for spares, like spare. You have them there, you need them, have a long-term contract because you don't require these items very frequently. Then here you've got routine or non-critical. Okay, here you've got, it's very low risk and low profit. You don't pay too much attention. In this particular one, the kind of, relationship I say is arm's length. Then here you've got leverage. This is where every buyer wants to be. Where you have leverage type of suppliers. Now, here, you've got multiple type of suppliers. The other third leg I should tell you, which you will learn about next term, is the negotiation approach that you will use. This one as well, you will try and pursue a win-win. This one you may pursue a win-lose. You can do a win-win if you want, but because you've got many suppliers, you can get away with a win-lose. Here it will be definitely win-lose. Okay, so this is the Kraljik Matrix. Please understand and remember it. Go through it over and over again, and go to the YouTube channel. It is also another channel that we use for our students to help them understand things. SIPS requires us to be as innovative as we can to help our students. So please go and visit that. Okay, so that's the relationships. Collaborative is there's a slight difference in what they say here, but it's not a train smash. Where they talk about arm's length type of relationship on the routine and on the bottleneck, what do they say? Bottleneck, they say close tactical. Yeah, you can have that as well. Close tactical and arm's length are very close together. Collaborative on strategic is the same as a closer alliance. It means that you are working closely together. And then transactional on the leverage type of suppliers. Let's look at the costs and key benefits of outsourcing. Why would you want to outsource? What benefits are there for your organization? The first one, in terms of costs, you find procurement involvement to establish whether outsourcing is practical. So procurement will be involved in that outsourcing. What benefits do you derive from it? It is increased expertise. Outsourced functions are often contracted to specific. I didn't finish that statement. How does that statement read in your book? Sorry? Contracted to specialist companies, right? And then you look at the other cost, which is procurement involvement in evaluating, selecting and awarding the contracts. That is another kind of cost that you will incur. It is also not just procurement practitioners. There are other technical people that are involved in the evaluation process of an outsourced contract. Management of outsourced contracts and performance levels and quality. So all those are levels, costs that will be associated with outsourcing. Then some organizations choose to employ outsourced contract managers to oversee the performance and remove the responsibility from procurement. This involves additional cost. So you will need to understand all these different levels of costs that come with the concept of outsourcing and what kind of benefits. Now let's look at outsourcing non-core and core work. Like I said to you, core activities are critical to the organization and relate closely to its strategic objectives. So, outsourcing core activities is not recommended. All right. So, like we talked about the engine for an automotive industry, automotive company, you know, you do not outsource things like that. The whole automotive organization, these guys who make cars, the things that they do in-house is the whole drivetrain, which is the engine, the gearbox, and the axle. All those things that move the vehicle. Most of the automotive companies, they keep them in-house. Why? Because that is where their intellectual property lies. Right. Then they can allow suppliers to do other things. Like if you remember when the indicator for the long time ago, indicators for the cars were only in the front or on the side of the car. But Mercedes was the first to include indicators on the mirrors. You've seen most Mercedes have got indicators on the mirrors. It was an intellectual property that they ran only for about 5-7 years. After that, Volkswagen, BMW, and everybody else jumped on board. Because they had outsourced that function to somebody else and then agreed with them that you will only give it to us for this period, and after that, anybody else can do it. But the drivetrain, which is critical, is kept in-house. So outsourcing core activities is not recommended. Procurement professionals can use an outsourcing decision matrix, which we are going to talk about now, to help evaluate which functions within the organization could be considered for outsourcing. You can use that. The matrix measures the strategic importance of the function, activity, or product against its contribution towards operational performance. And that is the outsourcing matrix. So it has, on the vertical axis, again, you will find the strategic importance of the item, and on the horizontal axis, you have the contribution to operational performance. So if both of these things are high, it contributes highly to operational performance, and it's strategically very important. What do we do? What decision do we make? Do we outsource or do we keep in-house? Are you with me? Yeah, look at that little matrix, TD. You keep it in-house. If you see that an item is highly strategic in your environment, and then it contributes extensively to operational performance. Operational performance, again, is linked to profit. So you will keep that item in-house. You retain in-house. And so on. So you can see if it's strategic importance, but it contributes very little, you create a strategic alliance with the supplier. If it contributes to operational performance, but low strategic importance, you can outsource. If it doesn't contribute to both, then eliminate that function. You don't need it at all. You don't perform it in-house, and you don't ask anybody to do it for you. Okay, so that's the next slide is just explanations of what the decision matrix is. Outsourcing can be considered for any non-core work or services within a business. The following functions are frequently outsourced. So now remember, we are making assumptions here. Like I said earlier, SIPs normally when you read the materials, they are biased towards the manufacturing industry. You might be in the computer industry, IT sector, like you work for SAP. You will not outsource the IT function because that is your core. Okay? So if you are an IT company IT is your core business. But here, normally we are we are looking at it in view of the manufacturing sector. Now, the other thing is catering. Now, if your company is a catering company, you won't outsource that whole function, because then the reason for your existence doesn't, you become an agent now. So yeah, so these are like in a manufacturing company, they would outsource IT function, they would outsource catering, cleaning, marketing, and so on. When the decision to outsource turns out to be ineffective, you must be ready to insource items. What does insourcing mean? Insourcing? Yes, thank you. Insourcing means you bring it back in-house. So what SIX recommends, and many procurement gurus or writers, that the buyer should not be shy to say, I made a mistake, or the buying organization. You should not be shy to say, we made a mistake. We outsourced it and gave it to somebody else to do it for us, but it's not working, let's bring it back in-house. Those decisions must be made on a regular basis. Okay, check the effectiveness of how your suppliers are working. Okay, let's now look at supplier pre-qualification or criteria for supplier appraisals. This happens for both sourcing side and outsourcing. Remember, sourcing, we are finding a supplier that is going to contract for items that we are unable to do internally. Outsourcing, we are getting a supplier on contract for things that we cannot do, but because of those 5 or 6 things I gave you, for financial reasons, for financial benefits, technological benefits, and so on, we decide to buy instead of make. Suppliers must be pre-qualified, okay, before we can give them a contract. Now, I'm showing you this because this is a generic pre-qualification approach. Many state-owned companies have got a different approach. So you guys who work for state-owned companies, this may not necessarily be applicable to you in the format it is done. You have to understand the requirements for public tender advertising, okay, before you engage suppliers to evaluate them directly. But what this one says is the following. Number one, as a procurement practitioner, you must carry out supplier pre-qualification and supplier appraisal. All these happen before you issue out an RFQ or an ITT. ITT stands for Thank you. Invitation to tender. Okay? So, before the pre-qualification, the procurement practitioner should find suppliers. And normally what you do to find these suppliers, you go through previous knowledge, and previous knowledge you go to the suppliers that you've used before, right? Then you do you look through market publications, like those publications that are written in magazines. You can get recommendations from the end user, okay? Then you can attend trade shows, do internet search. Internet search is always good. This is how you compile a list. In some sectors, such as South African, here your book says UK and things, but South Africa as well. In South African public sector, it is a legal requirement to advertise the contract opportunity on a suitable website. All right? Now, the suitable website for South Africa is, where do public, Portia, please help us. Where do public sector organizations advertise their tenders?
On the tender portal,
Yes, which is run by?
the central, the National Treasury, the Central Supplier Database.
Yeah, so you guys who are aspiring to work for the state, you must remember that you do not just do a private search for open tenders. You need to advertise suppliers on the tender portal for the government. Okay? It's important to remember that. Now, let's carry on with the private. More we'll talk about how private sectors operate, and more so based on the UK type of laws. So this is what they do. They do market research. Now, this is basically market research. You look into your current supplier database, you do some market publication, find as many suppliers as possible. In South Africa, if you have to find suppliers like this, you go again to the central supplier database and search for suppliers there. Because no one is allowed to do business with the government of South Africa if they are not registered on the central supplier database. And it's called CSD. Now, I'm sure most of your companies, if not all of you, your companies are registered there. I know Max Steels is. They are registered on CSD. Okay? Anyway, so you find them. And once you do, then you pre-qualify them. Okay? You pre-qualify them. So the pre-qualification, as again, it happens theoretically, I'm going to say, and know this theoretically. It happens before you issue the RFQ and the invitation to tender. All right? However, remember that public procurement rules are different. You don't need to pre-qualify a supplier unless an item is highly safety critical. Okay? But let's carry on with this concept. So you do the pre-qualification, and the purpose of that pre-qualification is to ensure that the supplier is sustainable financially, the supplier have the relevant requirements and experience, and so on. And how do you do this pre-qualification? You use the Carter's 10 C's. Carter's 10 C's of supplier pre-qualifications, which are the following. Number one, competency. So your pre-qualification questionnaire must ensure that you identify all those particular tenses. And like I said to you guys, start reciting these tenses to yourself so that if somebody wakes you up at 02 in the morning, say, TD, what are the Carter's tenses? You can say to them from each one of your fingers must be labeled one of the tenses. The thumb is competence. The next one is capacity. The next one is commitment. The next one is control systems. The next one is 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 that's right. So go through each one of those and ensure that you remember them well. Okay. Then you appraise suppliers. The buyer organization then evaluates the short-listed suppliers, okay, in more detail against more specific criteria. The process of appraising suppliers usually happens before sending invitation to tender. Now, like I said to you guys, this process is very lengthy. In public sector procurement, you don't do all these things before you send a tender out or an RFQ. Okay, but in private sector, you guys can do that. And for purposes of passing this exam, remember this process properly. And those of you who are still young and want to go to Australia and work in the UK and other parts of the world, remember this is the standard process that they use. They do very robust. By the time they're sending out an invitation to tender, they are 90% sure that these suppliers are able to deliver. I like this method because it prevents you from issuing out tenders. I mean, we have issued out tenders, sometimes you find them on this same central supplier database, and the suppliers don't have a clue what they're doing. They don't even submit, they don't even respond. You get maybe one person responding, meanwhile they say on the system that they can do the job. But this process allows you to filter off those guys who are chancers. They're just chancing to get a government tender. Anyway, so I like this approach because it eliminates all the riffraffs, the guys that are going to waste your time. So the appraisal process should be an ongoing process as the market or environmental conditions may change. So there's a big picture with circles at the bottom there. It shows you the different aspects of external forces that are having an impact on the supplier. You need to evaluate suppliers' capabilities on a regular basis, especially if they are you've got a long-term contract with them, okay? Evaluate them on a regular basis. Send them the questionnaire. How are they doing? You know, let them complete what was their profit in the previous financial year. They will tell you, because you don't want to be surprised when they go belly up and you do not know. Vendor or supplier performance management is extremely important. The performance of suppliers is integral to the success of the organization that they supply, and so requires ongoing management. Supplier management can be monitored by setting key performance indicators and service level agreements. All the KPIs must be set into quantitative or qualitative. We spoke about it in the previous course I did with you. In order for KPIs to be effective, they must be SMART. Please, another acronym that you need to remember, other than Carter's 10C, remember SMART. This means specific, measurable, attainable. Thank you, CD. What is called attainable? Huh? Achievable. Relevant. Time bound. So this is KPIs, and KPIs are like objectives. Objectives must be SMART, KPIs must be SMART. They must not be generic, they have to be specific. And you must be able to measure them. There must be things you can achieve. And they must be relevant and time bound. You cannot say this is ongoing. That's why, those guys who say, a KPI, what is the due date when you're going to achieve this? They say ongoing. Ongoing must not be used when you're monitoring KPIs. It has to be time bound. It will be achieved in 2022 or whatever. So you must agree on these KPIs during the negotiations and then monitor them, okay, on a regular basis as well. What are some of the risks that are associated with outsourcing? There are several risks associated with outsourcing. These could be because of the following: the organization's failure to identify and select a suitable supplier, leading to poor performance of the outsourced entity. You might see that the decision was rushed in trying to get a partner, and that will be a problem. The organization has unrealistic expectation of the outsourced provider, and so on. They refer to the table 1.7, which is, did I write it? No, I didn't write it. 1.7 for the risk that could emanate from these other causes. So do you have table 1.7 there? Yeah, that whole big table. So please refer to it. The market development and growth of outsourcing. Outsourcing has become a popular strategy for organizations. By outsourcing non-core activities, markets are developing in low-cost countries which are helping to build their economies. And it's not just low-cost countries. High-cost countries are also realizing that when they take the outsource to China, India, I don't know if you have ever phoned, you had a problem with Microsoft and you phone that helpline, that international helpline. You hear the accent of the person helping you, but they're not in America. That portion has been outsourced to India or to some place like that. But what is happening now is that some of these they are bringing back, they're insourcing again. Why? Because they know that they're taking the jobs away. And that was Mr. Donald Trump's approach, where he started to talk about bringing back jobs, America first, and things like that. But a lot of companies do outsource. There are mutual benefits of developing countries engaging with developed countries engaging with developing countries. Benefits linked to market development through the growth of outsourcing, including the following: cost savings to the developed country, ability to further grow, organizational, due to the non-core functions being outsourced, increased employment in developing countries, ethical and sustainable behavior promoted in developing countries. When an organization chooses to outsource a function, it can allow the company to develop in areas where previously there was no time or resources to do so. The last slide I want to share with you is about the regulations affecting employers' terms of employment. Now, there are various legislation requirements which exist to protect employees, to ensure that any individual working to provide a service keep their job when the supplier is changed. Okay? Outsourcing always, it involves people, because remember you were doing this thing in-house. Then you give it to somebody else. What happens to those people who are working for you? The Labor Relations Act number 66 of 1995 provides that when a business is transferred as a going concern, the effect is that employees of the business automatically become employed by the new owners. So if you think about all those cleaners that were cleaning for you, and that part is transferred somewhere else, the Labor Relations Act protects those people. All right? An automatic transfer of contract of employment takes place from the transferring employer, previous employer, to the acquiring employer, new employer, and so on. Now takes place in the event that the whole or part of any business, trade, undertaking, or service is transferred from the previous employer to the new employer as a going concern. So I put out some of these things from the Labor Relations Act for you to know. Know your rights. If you get outsourced, you must know what happens, that you are automatically, you secure your job with a new employer. Now what many people do is, many companies do, is they would employ you in the first year, and then after 1 year they start doing really funny things like retrenchment. That should not be the case. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of chapter 1. We are going to pick up speed. Like I said to you, this course requires that we go through, turn every stone. Please feel free to ask, okay? Feel free to ask. Today my class audience has been unusually quiet, especially with Cindy. I'm not sure what's the problem. But I hope you are okay. You're doing a balancing act between your usual work that you're used to and the new courses that you're doing. But just find time, guys. Find time, sit down, study.
This thing is difficult.
It is not.
You keep reading and reading. It's not very clear.
The day I will see your book with highlighters, and then I will know that yes, you are trying.
I was trying this.
Because you are doing it now.
No, this one, you can ask me this, I can tell you.
You see, now that because you are highlighting them.
Oh.
You see, I was telling the guys I was doing another course, which is a multiple choice course again. You need to have stickers. You know those, the post-it, I think we call them post-it. You know the post-it? The yellow sticker papers.
Yes. I know.
Yeah, you guys need to have those because this course requires you to remember everything verbatim. Okay? And to be able to distinguish between different concepts. Like I said to you last week, they don't give you a chance to write it in your own ways. They'll provide you the words and you choose the correct one.